Mayor Lapine, Mike Baker,
I'm here.
Tony Mitchell, Christy Worcester,
Present.
Cindy Potter,
Present.
I'm not, they can't hear me, but they can't hear me.
All good.
Dustin Hawkins, Jason Pollock. Looks like Tony Mitchell just joined us. Jeremy Green. Nicholas Sneed is excused. Penny Cudimo,
That work.
Steve Webb, Tim Gassner, and Tony Lanson. Trent Tices.
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Nick did put together a list of questions I thought would be a good start for us on this meeting here. Everybody have that on their packet? Everybody have that? Okay. So that would just kind of break down, break it down in those 4 sections and just kind of go through that. Anybody have any questions or comments before I get into that? Okay. The first area of focus there is, oh, I'm sorry, Christy, did you want to?
I think you can handle it, Mayor, but
Oh.
I'm certainly able to facilitate the discussion if you want me
Okay.
to.
Fill in the holes where I leave out?
Sure.
Okay. So okay, first off, education outreach. So as Nick and I were talking about this, we just didn't want to like put the switch and say, boom, this is what's happening. We want to kind of do this gradually. And I think the first part of that obviously is the education and outreach. So in that, there's which community partners can assist us with crafting the messages to the homeless campers about the city and city's new camping regulations. Do you want to break this, just go over this one at a time, or should I address all these and take it over?
I think we should take them one at a time
One at a time.
because it really
Okay.
is helpful for the recording of the meeting.
Okay, well then, let's start with that then. How can we get the message out?
I've been slowly getting the message out. Just kind of trying to ease my way into it.
Anthony has as well. Okay.
There's the Hive group that goes down there.
Oh, on the Saturday of that group?
Yeah, so they might be a source of, I believe, Hive. Yeah, it's a mutual aid type group.
Part of that too would just be a more formalized notice from the city, something that, we have to post, obviously, because there's a change in circumstances. And so we have to be able to give the public adequate notice to effectuate the change. We don't just go in there and start
Right.
implementing our
I don't
ordinance.
think everybody has access to the Pioneer or anything else, or our website or that sort of thing. So should we actually put up a sign? Something? Okay.
And then you got people down there that doesn't read or write, but I would not count on people having internet access or reading the book. No. No, I don't.
Backing up for attendance, I'd like to point out the Chief Tim Plummer is also here in attendance. That's just for the record, Chief. Okay, I think that's good. So we need to figure out how to put a sign up there, and same time, Trent, if you can continue to spread the word, that'd be great, and we'll see if someone from the Hive can also share that.
Just another suggestion, Mayor. Is Mosaic medical? I know they used to bring in the medical van on a regular basis. Are they still doing that?
Out of it during COVID, but I think now they're trying to get back into doing regular. It used to be every Tuesday afternoon they would go out, so.
So that they could be a good party if they're in fact still doing it.
And then what about notifying, out?
Yes, we will, especially, I mean, if they're on public property especially. I mean, we'll work with our city attorney to make sure that we have the proper legal notice identified and then I know you're starting to have some of those initial discussions with folks out in the community. But we'll actually need to provide a formal notification to implement any change.
I know, I think there's some camps out there I'm not aware of. We'll have to track the, those spaces out, and then it'd be helpful if we can create a map and pinpoint where all those sites are at, and then know who's actually, made contact, so we're not.
Right, and I think that's where our law enforcement will come in because they actually know where people are, and it's gonna likely change. I mean, because we give somebody notice at one place, they
They could remove,
potentially move to another location that isn't an area that's been identified, and so it's gonna be a continuous process until, you know, people are understanding what the ordinance really is. And it's gonna take a group effort to make that happen. Has there been discussion, because I missed the last meeting and I apologize, has there been discussion about when this official change would take place so that we can begin preparing our timelines from a staff perspective?
I thought Nick mentioned, was it 60 to 90 days, Mayor? I don't know if there's a particular date of implementation.
I think this is all gonna be based on when the shelter is open.
That I was able to confirm with Ricardo that I'm in discussions with now. It's gonna be more January-ish.
Got a lot of wiggle room here.
And I thought for some of the funding, like the absolute date, if you had to pick a day, it was January 24th.
January 9th.
Every night, everything has to be up and running.
The money
For the grant.
that the additional million and
Okay.
plus that the city got needs to be spent by January 9th, that's my understanding.
You know what I'd like to see? I mean, I know the biggest tie that's is going to struggle with the show due to the shelter is the time frame. As far as when, how long they can, you know, that, I know the big rub right now is like, okay, the time frame on when camping is allowed. But one thing that I think we can help move or push along is the location. So those who are camped out in the bar, we can start directing them towards the campsite. Where it is, well, there's, where the R behind Sonic is the one, and the other is a little further over on the 3rd Street right away. Somehow label it. Yeah, we should, if there's some way we could actually, yeah, I think that would be helpful. Right, but that might be a step at least, is if we can get those actually marked. And then those people who are out and about whatnot, we can start getting them to migrate to that area. And then we'll worry about the time frame later once we get the shelter up and that kind of stuff, but that might be something we can start doing to help flush them out of those areas.
There still will be a winter shelter opening by November 15th. It'll just probably be, I'm guessing, about a 15-bed capacity, such as we've been doing to date. It looks like 27. Looks like we lost a couple beds because of doors in the doors they had to put to the outside.
Dr. Baker?
Just a clarification question. If we start directing people there now, and it's an active construction site that's all fenced off and everything, is there a better way to message that than sending them there now?
With the sites,
That's the other piece about the site preparation. I know in some of the initial discussions we had, we talked about providing an access for fire and EMS in case there was an emergency situation, so that there was a safe access to the campsite.
so we
and
should prepare those sites first.
I'm thinking we should, because
Okay.
otherwise you're gonna, I mean, I know the intent is to move people out, but then we can't even prepare the site if they're starting to relocate there immediately.
Okay.
Chief, what do you think about that? I mean, can you give some input there?
Well, and if we move them there before the site's ready, we have to move them again.
Right.
To get the site ready. So it's 2 moves.
Right. Right.
Isn't it true that the current site is going to continue to be an approved site, along the,
That's one of them, yes.
so it's there,
A few minor changes, because there are a few campsites that are outside of the designated area.
okay. Okay,
What would it take to get that other site?
I will talk to staff about that, because I think we had previously discussed cutting in a roadway or putting some gravel down or something, and I don't know what supplies we have on hand
And
in Public Works and the timing for putting that into a work plan, or if we'd be contracting it out. Those are all pieces that need to be worked through with staff.
Okay. I'm sorry, I've kind of taken us off the trail here.
Yeah,
That's
that's
my,
why we gotta get that.
yeah. Let's get back to boom. Are there, I'm seeing here, is there any issues about translating messages in Spanish? Do we have a homeless population that's Spanish speaking?
yes, yes.
Okay, is there,
A Latino Community Association would be my suggestion.
okay. Okay, so that's not gonna be an issue then? Right. Okay,
The issue is we're gonna put it in writing.
we should put it in
We
Spanish.
need to make sure that whoever is doing the translating over is accepted by the courts, because if not, the courts don't accept slang as proper notification. So whoever is going to do the one to translate from English to Spanish or whatever, we need to make sure that whatever they publish, the courts will accept as notice. Because if it's slang or terms that are used, I mean, take, for example, the English language is very complicated. The word love can mean a whole lot of things. I love hamburgers, as opposed to I love my dog, or I love the color blue. I mean, we have to make sure that the language is concise, or it won't stand up to what it is you're trying to accomplish.
I would think though that a certified translator, you use them for a particular reason, so.
Yeah, I think that'd be appropriate. Okay, so that sounds good. And then can we have a sign created, Christine? Can I have it posted?
Where would you anticipate it being posted? At the current camp, the
Yes,
primary one?
I would have it there, yeah. We might have to make more than one. Yeah,
We'll see what Public Works has for signage, and
okay,
I'm not familiar with what our sign shop is yet, but I will follow up on that.
okay. Then that takes care of the first two signage information, see. Okay, where were we just kind of pushed those top 3, right? Okay, are there known successful approaches to educating? I'm gonna look at you, Dr. Baker, because that seems like that's your guys' approach.
Yeah, Trent's got established relationships. We've got established programs. We've got some incentives to participate as well. So I'm sure the Hive also has some kind of and I know they were at one point delivering water at one point as well. So they probably have a relationship as well. So.
Okay, so right now the biggest thing is signages. City will work on See what we can do to put signs together. We'll make sure, probably reach out to you as well for communicate, or translation. We'll have that attached to the sign there as well. And then,
And just quick, if, depending on the turnaround time for, like, if the public works sign crew isn't available, we've got a great working relationship with the local sign shop, RipQ.
okay,
They've made a ton, especially for a COVID response, they've made a ton of stuff for us and they got a great turnaround.
okay,
And price wise, they're pretty competitive when you consider everything else.
great, thank you. Okay. Karen McCarthy is the one I know right off the top of my head in that. Okay, move on to the next section. Reduce camp sizes. Who can meet with the residents of each campsite, identify the need of changes to reduce camp size to comply with these regulations? I think that's gonna be a long-term, well, I don't wanna say long-term, but that's gonna take time to work on that. Reduce that kind of stuff. I kind of wish Tony Lansing was here because that was something he had a discussion about us too, that he was concerned with.
Yes, I'm sorry to keep jumping in here.
Oh, please.
We can message that this is coming, but when we start talking compliant and regulations, that to me indicates that's a law enforcement action. We could do the education around it, but when it comes time to really getting serious about it, that would then fall there to the city in some capacity, either through planning or whoever's going to be tasked with this, maybe even the council members themselves.
And I think, the notification is a critical piece of that.
Yeah.
So if we don't include the count size that's gonna be allowed, we're just gonna go back into a continuous cycle. So, the initial outreach is what's really important in, the transitionary process is just making sure that they know what all of the regulations are. And it's unfair to say, okay, well, you gotta get moved and you're gonna have to move in and out, but we don't give them all of the pieces to that. When you move in, you're gonna be limited to using this size of a campsite, and these materials are gonna be excluded and those types of things, to give them time to make those changes.
So are you thinking?
I think we need to, there's the initial piece, you're getting notified that you're gonna have to be moving. But if you come back, this is what standards you have to abide by. Well, okay, we give them notice that they have to move, so then they're gonna move. They have to pick up their camp though, every day. Yeah. But, so the next day they come back, they have to realize, okay, no, you can't have a 20 by 20 tent that's made out of wood and everything else.
Pallets and all that.
Right. Right. Right, because that's unfair, right? We need to give them the information up front so they know what the expectation is. Yeah.
Tell them where the campsites, the new ones, or the other ones they could go to could be, but that we're working on access.
Sure.
So as they're seeking their resources over the next few months in preparation for winter, they know, hey, they're gonna have to get rid of some of the wood and other pieces, and that, the new material is gonna be X. And so when you're having some of those initial conversations, if you're out there, those are kind of preparatory things that I think would be helpful to the public, so that they can start to make those adjustments as resources come to them and they're offered to them by others. That they know what that outlying expectation is. I think that's going to be helpful. I know it's a lot of change for people. And I feel like we are really giving an adjustment period, but they need to know what it is, right?
So will you give the letters out?
Oh, yeah, we need to start working on that messaging now.
Yeah.
And,
Thought so.
yeah. Well, we've identified a place, so, technically somebody could go there now. It's just that internally, we've had these discussions.
Once we get that site prepared, then they can start going there. Right.
Correct.
It's just, we really can't enforce, hey, you can't be here until they have a place they can. Right.
Right, I mean, theoretically, if they move out during the day, then you can do some of that work during the day. You know, if we need to get a tractor in there to run some, you know, a punch in a kind of a makeshift road or however that's determined, then, you know, those, that kind of thing can be done during the day, but it's just giving people time.
No, right where. So, you know, the current people are right there along the, kind of like along the creek. But right where Sonic is, directly west of there, there's that empty lot up there. That's where the shelter's gonna go. And then just on the other side of that is a Third Street right away. So that would be like the second location.
You can
You-
get there, but fire and EMS rig is
You,
gonna have.
you can, but it's kind of rough. And so we
Yeah.
want to go level that out. Right. We want to level it out, make it where there's actual, a path for emergency vehicles to get in and that sort of thing.
Mhm. So I think, you know, really the initial, you're starting to have some conversations, but include in those conversations, you know, that there's gonna be additional requirements. And then when we get the formal notice prepared, it's gonna be replicating that and then giving that notice and setting a timeline for all of that. And I think what the committee's discussed is a transitional period of time, correct? And I'm hearing that that's January or sooner.
I thought I had heard 60 to 90 days. I didn't, yeah, I didn't hear all the way out to.
Probably get a,
Okay.
we'll probably get a closer timeframe at the city council when we get that report there.
Could I then get a clarification? Because in my memory, you could not restrict until there was a suitable alternative
That was my understanding.
as a, like, as in shelter, not
Right.
in as an alternate campsite.
Correct.
Which would then put us 100% into January, because that's the only facility that's really available for a shelter. If we're talking about displacement only, then that is, these sites have already been designated as allowed, therefore they could technically go right now. I think that's a big
Right.
discrepancy.
So that's kind of what I'm talking about now. All we're doing is talking about just relocating one spot for another spot. So it's like a wash. The part of what I'm thinking about the enforcement is just, okay. Because I don't think there's really a big difference if you're saying, okay, you can't be on 9th and C Street, but you can be over here. 9th and C Street, I used to live over there. Anyway, but when we're saying, hey, you gotta go, whatever, I'm saying, once we got the shelter plates, then it's easier to enforce that part.
Suitable location, I find that a little bit interesting because there'll be a suitable location November 15th when the winter shelter opens. It's just limited to 15, but we might say, well, that's not a suitable location because it's only 15. The new shelter is only going to be 27, plus maybe a little overflow. So I don't know that we're going to have, is suitable
ever fill up,
location
though,
the
even with-
whole population?
But even with 15, do you ever fill up?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
But I mean, the population is probably what, 100, 125, 150? The new location will be fractional of that, you know, only about 25% or less than that, so. That's correct. It's just a 4.5. There's no housing after winter shelter in the new plan.
I mean,
It doesn't start.
we technically could enforce this now because the council has identified an area to camp. However, we're choosing not to enforce it to allow some transition time and to get things established to make it a safer place for both the campers and for public safety and access to the site.
That makes sense.
I think there's some cross confusion with the 60 and 90 days. My understanding with the 60 and 90 days is that's how much time we were gonna give them. Once it was decided that we're now going to implement this thing fully, give them 60 to 90 days to educate them, to identify their resources, to move out before whatever enforcement action is going to be taken is taken. We use that as an opportunity to go out and say, okay, the new ordinance in play. These are the other resources available to you. It's kind of like when we did the seatbelts. State of Oregon for the longest time did not have any seatbelt compliance. You didn't have to wear your seatbelt. So when that law finally passed, we took almost a year in the law enforcement industry to educate the public before we started issuing citations. So I saw that 60, 90-day window, in my mind, that's what that was. The law's in effect. It's like the seatbelts was in effect for a whole year. But we didn't issue any citations simply because we wanted people to understand the law, comply with the law. Voluntary compliance is a whole lot better than here's a bunch of citations. So I thought my understanding that 60 to 90 days was just that. So, okay, here it is. It's in effect and we're going to make contact with you. And it's now 11 o'clock in the morning. You were supposed to be out of here by 7. So we start just doing it that way. And then gradually there's going to come a point in time wherever that marker is, 60 days out, 90 days out. Now we're going to start taking enforcement action and your grace period's passed.
That's consistent with what I understood.
Yep, that sounds good.
All right, on to the next one. Trash removal. Will the dumpsters placed out there, will it be used?
I believe they will.
One concern that someone brought up was if we put a dumpster out there, everybody might, not everybody, but a lot of other people might end up using that dumpsters. And I'm like, how real is that concern? And is the concern that we want that to be very cleaned up, does that outweigh the other concern?
Question, if you're gonna build an access road down there, I don't know when it's gonna get done though. But could we put it closer to the camp part where, I mean, kind of more in.
Because I see where you're going, because then it'd be kind of like out of sight, out of mind for anybody else.
I wouldn't. And I would think that would mitigate the Joe Q public is not gonna go into the camp.
You're right.
Drop off. So I would believe that it would need to be really in the camp.
I would say then after we get, this is my opinion, but after those two, the one side is actually improved, and then if we can go in and improve that other side, that'd be a good time to put dumpsters into there. And I say to improve because that way the dump or the garbage truck can actually then get in there to.
And then who will be supporting the cost of the dumpsters and the dumpster? Is that taken on by the city?
I think that would have to fall on the city.
I think maybe we could ask our
Maybe we can pull,
solid waste haulers to see if they would give some donations as well.
yeah. Maybe we can get that partially out of that grant too. Grant funding can help pay for that maybe. I'll have to ask Nick. That we'll know after we talk to Public Works, because as Chris said, we had to figure out what resources we have right now.
The only concern with a dumpster, of course, would be, how do you advise people not to put things that shouldn't be in a dumpster?
We're concerned about what they're burning that they shouldn't be burning.
I was just gonna say, how do you advise them not to light it on fire?
I mean, one week we went on 3 different fires in a 48-hour period. Over in that camp. No, actually 2 of them were at that camp and 1 was under a bridge. I'm not worried about them burning stuff in the dumpster. I'm worried about them burning at the camp, yeah. But
And I guess the piece of it is if you've got your camp and you move out for the day, is the trash gonna be left there for somebody else to pick up? Or is it gonna be, cleaned up on a daily basis? And I can guess that some people might clean up and I can guess that others won't. And that's gonna be another issue that we're gonna have to address.
Yeah.
It becomes something that becomes really expensive for the city to manage on its own.
So I have a feeling this is gonna be something that we address as it comes along because. Okay, moving on to supportive services. So I was curious, who can help with determine what support services are needed? And I'm guessing Trent has heads up on that right away, but on the high risk team that I serve on, we're able to target certain people who have needs. And then that has a lot of different resources that attend that meeting, and then we can brainstorm who can provide what that need is, or where we can place that person throughout the state, or this kind of stuff. And then, I've seen it work for certain people, but I'm kind of wondering, listening to some law enforcement, it all depends on who you talk to. If you talk to certain people, well, everybody down there has mental issues. You talk to the certain law enforcement, there's only a couple of them that have mental issues. There's only a couple of them who may have mental issues. So where I'm getting at, if we could target those individuals who truly have mental issues that need services, if I can get those names and we can actually kind of get a clue, then I can bring that to the high risk team. And because there's even people from resources on the reservation who attend those meetings. Perhaps we can actually find what we can, there might be somebody there who has resources that can benefit that person, get them off the street, and maybe into some place, treatment somewhere or whatever. There might be somebody they've already heard of or study. I don't know, but that's just without knowing. We don't know. So I'll Tim, if you can ask your officers too, if they can target that. But if I can get names, I can bring that to the high risk team and find out.
But just the only thing I'm concerned about is if they're engaged as a client with public health or possibly even Best Care for services, and then their information is protected under HIPAA.
Best Care is actually on this high risk team.
So
And
I-
this has been brought up because when I don't off the top of my head, but I'm not really concerned about it because I brought up the same point when they wanted me to provide reports, patient care reports on certain, and someone from the state said this is protected. Because of the type of team it is, HIPAA is not an issue.
all under HIPAA because it's.
No, because of that, it doesn't fall under HIPAA. There might be. I think there probably is. I know there's somebody from Best Care on that team. But high risk, it's like the adult high risk team. I'm sure I'm butchering it. I think it's changed.
So Mayor, are we talking about supportive services at an individual level or at an overall?
At an individual, because like some
Okay.
people, if some person has a certain, how I seen this team work before is there's like, there's one person that was homeless and roamed around and the team got in and actually got her into treatment. And then later she came back and all of a sudden we couldn't get that person to treatment because she was using drugs. So we couldn't get her into this treatment, but we were trying to maybe we can get her into somewhere else. And that's really, it's kind of frustrating because you kind of get cut off the kneecaps trying to get them in one therapy or, whatever, because of this. But there's got to be something else you might be able to get them into. So that's what I'm hoping for. If there's somebody truly has a mental issue, not there because they're getting high or drunk all the time, but actually has a mental issue, then there might be some kind of resource for them.
We will be looking to stand up a case management function as one of the key parts of the shelter services organization, again, to Michael's point, though, that you'll have to have ROI to be able to share within the system.
Yeah, and don't bring that information. I mean, HIPAA, this committee isn't covered by HIPAA. But if you can bring it to the high risk team, that is covered. So if there's somebody. Yeah,
Chair, we have a question online, asking what is a high risk team?
The high risk team is geared towards adults. The high risk team is a group up of different human resources agencies in the community, such as Best Care Treatment, Adult Protective Services. Our agency somehow got pulled into, our fire and EMS somehow got pulled into it. I think it's because we respond to these patients on 911 calls. I believe there's someone there from the reservation. So it's basically, yeah, and there's other teams on there. I'm off the top of my head, I can't remember, but it's a team that comes together and targets people who are at high risk of, yes. And so they come together to try to see if there's actual resources out there that if one team can't think of, another agency can. And so to try to provide the better good for that individual. So. I seen him work really well with an individual. It was a Native woman who was a resident at East Cascade Assisted Living, and there were some special needs there. And this team came together and they were able to find a better avenue for that person at another facility, and it worked out real well for her in that situation. Okay. Are there any organizations, local, regional, state, that could assist the city in identifying these needed supportive services? I think we're talking about some already.
Mayor, Chief, sir.
Yes.
I'll put out there that there are a lot of regional players that aren't very engaged.
Here, like the homeless leadership team.
Like the Homeless Leadership
Yes.
Council, Neighbor Impact, who has funding, who's helped sometimes, but are supposed to be a Central Oregon organization. There's organizations like Thrive, who are regional, who are here at a very limited. I think we as a committee should really reach out to Central Oregon Health Council, as they're a funder of a lot of these agencies, and see where those dollars are going and how we can tap into them.
That-
I'll take that as my.
Thank you. That falls down here on the bottom there too, when Nick asked if we can reach out to some of these. And I actually connected with the homeless leadership team a couple months ago. And it was funny when I was talking to her about, sometimes people think that Central Oregon is Deschutes County centric. And you can only get that help if you really become that squeaky wheel. And she goes, I'll go as far as say it's Ben centric. So, right, but that's a good point. And I think we just need to be that one to speak up and bite. And so I'll reach out to her on I think her name's Emily from the homeless leadership team. But anyway, I'll reach out to
Is
her.
it Eliza?
Eliza, yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
And I'm on the board. of the
You're on that
Homeless
board?
Leadership
Okay.
Coalition.
Well,
Yeah.
then we should have you reach out.
Yeah, so as we, kind of get into this, certainly we could, I think, tap into the HLC. They've got experience. This is the
Yeah.
wheelhouse to be able to say, hey, what do you
What do you
believe
think? Right.
are some of the services that,
And she was great because she was the one that educated me a lot on low barrier, high barrier, and a bunch of other stuff. I got a lot of education meeting up with her. So if we can reach out to them to find out some tips on how to go forward, or
So is it Homeless Leadership Council or?
Homeless Leadership Coalition,
coalition,
HLC.
that's right.
Okay.
I actually found them by accident on a web search. It was kind of cool.
And the HLC is really highly interested in not just being a Deschutes or Crook County centric there. It's always about how can we, do
Right.
more and come alongside Jefferson County.
It was very helpful, but I think she needs there's not a lot of presence here. I think you need to open the door and bring him in. So they have you've already got that footprint, it's easier for them to come in and start sharing.
Talking about that, and Thrive is the other one. They're Central Oregon, Western Academy, but I think they are. Oh,
They're in our building, once a week on Thursdays, so we'll definitely be reaching out to them, as far as what they can do bigger picture wise. They're really focused on housing stability, which fits perfect with this model. So we can get them involved, more actively involved than just what they are now. I think that'd be a good partnership to have.
One suggestion, Mayor, is that as we move, past the ordinance and regulations and, as we're beginning to contemplate now, how can we really actively look to other things to support this population? I think we have an opportunity to invite key players from these organizations into a homeless. We have the forum here in the Homeless Advisory Committee to say, hey, we want to start talking about on a broader basis. I understand that we started where we started, but I think we have an opportunity, and I think some of these players that are looking to understand how they can help Jefferson County, I think that they would really be willing to participate.
That'd be great. Maybe we can invite them to our next meeting or future meeting.
One at a time or collectively, and everybody's hearing the same message at once? Just
I would recommend collectively if we could.
I think Nick has that on his list. Should we schedule the Deschutes County Homeless Outreach Coordinator to an upcoming meeting to talk about their lessons learned? So would you see that organization as well as these others that have been mentioned, Neighbor Impact, Thrive, Central Oregon Health Council, and Homeless Leadership Coalition?
I would,
On, at the bottom of the table there, could we schedule the Deschutes County Homeless Outreach Coordinator?
I would just wonder what that job is. If, because sometimes outreach coordinator versus homeless liaison versus support, those are all different things that people do. I would, as we're talking about supportive services, it'd probably be good to reach out to the, what's that center the big center they have in Deschutes County for like,
Coordinated office, the CHRO, the Coordinated Homeless Response Office.
stabilization center. So yes, so which does a lot of the work that we're talking about here with outreach and education and support and referrals. The thing when we talk about supportive services, that is such a huge undertaking, and I can almost guarantee that'll overwhelm the faith-based network instantly with what we're talking about here. And so we need something in place to support the faith-based network, because when we're talking about direct client services, that's a whole different ballgame than having the warming shelter set up to give food and shelter for the evening. Supportive services are expensive and time consuming, especially when you look at individual needs. So I would look more at what this person's responsibilities are. If there is someone similar position, then invite them. And I'd also reach out to other counties, like Lane County, who has their Cahoots program, which is a partnership with behavioral health and law enforcement, where they send folks out to be that intermediate to offer the support before law enforcement comes out and get them into those services. And so those programs like that are what we need to look at.
Is that mental health and law enforcement or mental health and fire?
Mental health and law enforcement.
Okay.
So I know they're listed as one of the best practice models for this kind of work. So I think getting creative with stuff like that versus relying on Deschutes County for similar model would be more effective for us.
Great to see how they get funding for that too.
On the way here, it's curious, this conversation, Chris Ogren, he has a role in the Coordinated Homeless Response Office, the CHRO in Deschutes, and he's also tied in with COIC, who's the lead agency for the HLC. He was asking, was there a possibility that is there like a virtual option, and could he be a fly on the wall and participate in our meetings? So that might be an opportunity to be able to say yes. And then because of that, he may be able to feedback to really spur the HLC's thinking about the window is opening up here in Jefferson County, and we're really looking for assistance and, tapping into your experience to build something that's greater than what we have now.
Sure.
So I think there are individuals regionally, to Michael's point, that they're celebrating the progress that's being made here. And I have to believe that they would want to be able to come alongside and see how they could support.
Like it.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is perhaps for one of our near future meetings, we would be inviting Neighbor Impact, Thrive, Central Oregon Health Council, Homeless Leadership Coalition, and someone from the Stabilization Center to join us for a discussion. And would that be a description of the services they provide and whether they could contribute to providing additional services within Jefferson County and i.e. Madras specifically? Is that the goal?
I would say yes, and, yes, this is what you are currently expected as a Central Oregon agency that's getting funding for the region. And what can you bring specific for this project here, knowing what's going on in Jefferson County?
Okay, and then in follow-up, we reach out to some additional resources, i.e. bringing Lane County in, talking about their specialized programs, doing some more research with potentially Deschutes County and the services that they provide, and have that at a future meeting. After we have this
Yeah.
initial one to talk with our.
And I'm just was my recommend. I'm not saying that's what we should do as a committee. I'm just putting out that there for consideration. I'm not
Right,
saying-
I'm asking the entire committee. I'm looking at you because I know a lot of this was
Right.
something that you suggested, so I made.
The HLC is synonymous with the continuum of care, which they lead and manage. And the continuum of care is it's a regional HUD construct. So when they're going out to annual competitive process to obtain funds, they're thinking regionally, not just certain cities or.
No, she actually brought up the grant that we were able to get to help complete the shelter. That was part of the grant she was telling about that. Get into this, and Nick was all over it. So that was helpful.
So to answer your question, Christy, I think yes and yes on the 2 points.
Okay.
Here's what we're trying to do here. We're building up. And what are your services, and where do you see that you can participate? And I think that's going to be a kind of a progressive dinner conversation. It's going to be more than one conversation. And it could be, Mayor, that over time, a key representative, I'm part of it. And at the same time, I'm kind of focused on the immediate as this thing lifts up. But I would say, is there anyone else from like an HLC perspective that can come and represent, regional opportunities as well?
I like it. I think that's something that's more immediate that we target here in the near future. And then after that, I like the idea of bringing in somebody from Lane County that can talk about that program. So I mean, kind of interesting. It's interesting because I've been on a call where a woman right off the bat goes, and I already forgot the name of the team, but I knew she's talking about, like, this isn't Portland. We don't have that team here. But that specific team was a paramedic and a social worker there that they use there. And but I'm like, oh, sorry. Then we don't have that resource here, but it would be interesting to see.
Well, I just need to be able to convey this to Nick when he gets back. So I'm
He's going to be so overwhelmed.
making sure that I'm capturing what the desire of the committee is.
Are we taking online questions from public? Because we have a hand raised.
What's the question?
Really, you can unmute and speak.
Hi, everybody. My name is Emily Hammond. I am the Central Oregon Education Outreach Coordinator for the Fair Housing Council of Oregon. I just wanted to do a really quick introduction and say that, yeah, I wanted to make myself available as a resource if anybody wanted to do any sort of training or education about housing discrimination. So maybe for the folks that you're working with, if they're having issues with source of income discrimination, things like this. Yeah, and also let you all know that occasionally we get community partnership funds. So small, like they're not exactly grants, but yeah, that's something that I can be in touch with if somebody is interested, and yeah, work on distributing some funds regionally to folks who are doing work to further their housing and housing issues regionally. So I'll put my email in the chat if anybody wants to reach out. I'd love to talk more. Yeah, thanks for letting me sit in.
Thank you, Emily. So Christie, have we gone through this agenda on there, on that block?
I think we pretty much got through the staff report, yes.
Good. We still have some time left over, and something I brought up last meeting, I kind of want us to also start to including now that we got that ordinance passed. This is the homeless group that we don't see. We know there's a number of population that we have that are homeless that are either couch surfing or living in the cars, that kind of thing. And do we, Dr. Baker, do we have an idea of what that number is, or is there kind of an outreach for them as well that we can target?
No, that's definitely the hardest population to reach. The unstable housing, I think the last time public health participated in the point in time count, that by far made up the majority of the estimated number of homeless in our community. Hearing Emily talk, I did a slight chuckle to myself about discrimination for housing. We just don't have the housing stability to get people into to begin with. And I know the city's got some big plans on moving forward with affordable housing, multiple housing complex. And so that and the average cost of housing in the community really leads to multi-generational housing with multiple shared housing. And I don't think that's a number we'll ever have an accurate count on. And Tony, I don't know if you agree or not.
Yeah, I agree. They refer to that segment of the population as the precariously housed. And there's really no survey or no assessment process or whatever to really get at what that really looks like. We just hear individually and anecdotally about situations that then you know that person is precariously housed. But yeah, there's nothing that really accurately gets
So
at.
we know they're there. We just don't know really what the numbers are. And are they getting are we able to get them resources as far as, I guess they're struggling like everybody else and trying to find food or that sort of thing, or?
Yeah, in listening to what Michael said, I 100% agree. These are the systemic issues. We can talk about working on some things at the individual level, but these are really the systemic issues that take a whole, a change at the system. You can do a lot of things in terms of housing focused case management, for example, but if you don't have the housing unit, it doesn't go anywhere. You can put a housing choice voucher in someone's hands that's good for a certain amount of time. But if they can't find housing, that thing, for example, as one example, then it goes.
We need some low income housing and we need it soon. One thing that kind of,
I currently have about 10 homeless couch surfing clients.
started looking for a home to get into. But one thing that kind of concerned me is Louise Mayer caught me at a coffee cupper since she was asking me about, when we broke the senior housing that we were supposed to break ground for. It's coming back. There was a holdup over in Portland of our last report, and by today, they're supposed to be starting up again on the foundation. But what really concerned me, the reason why she was concerned was the apartments that she lives in has been bought out and they're gonna be having to move out because it's gonna be used for, treatment homes, housing or something like that. Yeah, which is great that it's gonna be used for that, but it's also gonna be displacing other people in the process of doing that. So that, I found that to be kind of concerning, so she was hoping that they'll open up, so seniors will be able to move in that. I don't. Yeah, chat with me afterwards, yeah.
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 Oh, no, I don't, yeah, sorry.
So Nick did include a second staff report, which I think we could address at a future meeting to just talk about some of the projects that we could consider into the future to kind of help people that are not, I mean, I guess they're considered houseless. But, you know, potential code amendments that might also assist people that are in these situations, residing in their vehicles or RVs, and implementing some safe parking programs and RV housing, et cetera. So he's kind of started a list there, and if you'll think about these items before a next meeting, this is something we could bring back. But thinking about some of those other pieces that would address what the mayor was talking about, sometimes the people that you don't see and don't really identify with because they're living in their vehicle and it may be moving around and you may not see that on a regular basis. So that, and then the people that are dealing with, you know, staying with other individuals that they may know, couch surfing, those types of situations as well. So he's got a list started there. Think about others, things that we could add to that in the future, and I'll have him bring this back to a future meeting for discussion.
Talked about this, and I don't know what the current code, I know accessory dwelling units and tiny homes have always come up. I don't know what the city stance on those. I know the county has opted out of ADUs, accessory dwelling units. And I don't think there's an appropriate place for a tiny home, for lack of a better term, village. But I know several communities, I think Ben had a huge veteran one that was really well received and really supportive. But that goes back to the supportive services needs. If you
Right.
build it, then what? Or if you make it available, then what? I don't think we're allowed per code to do that right now. So that might be a update as well.
Right.
And I have worked in communities as well where they do actually allow an accessory dwelling unit on every lot within the city. So those are some development considerations that could be explored as well. Not all communities feel that way, and you know, you get into all of these issues like, well, how much SBC charges do you charge them? Is it a full house or not? I mean, it gets to be a very complex discussion. But there are some cities that do allow it. There's some that allow it on a lot size of a specific size or greater. So that as development occurs, people are actually building that in, and it actually helps. You know, they can become a mother-in-law quarter, an affordable place for their, young adults to live in their family as they, explore and get out on their own. They don't, finding an apartment is expensive. They don't exist, and they can't find one, and so they end up staying at home with mom and dad. But if you had that other piece, people experience health conditions where they have to move in with their family as well. They're maybe not that safe, but if you have that accessory dwelling unit, that gives them a place to live and reside, so they're not forced out into these other conditions. So those are a lot of different things that could be talked about. And so think about those and others that you might brainstorm, and we'll add them to the list at a future meeting.
We may, when we get there, want to have Rick Russell, and I forget my colleague's name, as coordinator. She's coordinating the Mountain View Community Development Safe Parking Program. I think we could very easily get them out here or virtually to talk to us about the development of the program and their they're a couple years into it or something like that. These efforts, I know we're just talking about code change, but when we talk about tiny home villages and safe parking, these efforts don't work without being managed by some entity. You just don't stand them up and they're just this community opportunity. They have to ultimately be managed and overseen by some entity.
That kind of concerns me because they'll have to find funding from that. Ultimately, that's another FTE somewhere.
In one of the cities where I've worked, we also had a permit process. So if you had an RV, you could, come into the city, apply for a permit, and it could be applied for a certain period of time. Now, as we were experiencing housing challenges in that community, I had a discussion with the council and they gave me some leeway to extend those permits beyond what was allowed within the code until we could make those code changes. But those are areas that could also be explored, a permit system, so we know where it is, we know it's been allowed. And then if there's a complaint by a neighbor, things are too noisy or they're not afforded their, property rights, then those could be addressed. But in many cases, those occurred, there was no problem with the neighbors and it gave someone a solution that they needed.
The RV parking, the biggest concern, at least from a public health standpoint, is sanitation and waste. There are no current regulations that someone is illegally dumping, that local jurisdiction have really any authority to do anything about. So that usually gets referred to Department of Environmental Quality, and that can be a process that is unending because it deals with, the only solution then is to require them to connect directly to a sewer or to build a septic tank. And if we're dealing with transitional housing needs, no one has money to connect to the sewer so if we do something, there have to be some kind of understanding that you have to have it connected appropriately for sanitation, for sewer and water, because no matter where you're at, they may be supportive of you being there and helping you. But once it becomes a health hazard, then everyone wants you out of there. I think we need to address that.
Like Beverly.
And I think that's why in that community, it was a limited period of time. That might be also something we could explore with the county. I know that they're making some improvements to the RV dump at the fairground site. And the city's participated in the cost of those improvements. So maybe they would be willing to allow, we can give some vouchers or something.
That's assuming they're operable. I think we're seeing in Bend on Hunnell Road, there's just
Right.
broken down trailers that are basically shelters that aren't functioning anymore.
Right.
That's another.
And I don't see that being allowed in our code. I think people would have an issue with that.
No.
But having my former remarks, I think it would be profitable to hear from the safe parking
Yeah.
program because in standing these up, I'm sure that they're encountering these challenges and they have, their system addresses that. Yeah.
All good comments. Does anybody have anything else? Yes. Please come up here and introduce yourself.
To your city website. I know there's pushback on that, but a lot of these people do have connections to Facebook and they're not as comfortable with websites as some of the rest of us might be. So, our community event is coming up August 5th. I think it would be really good for the city to have a presence there somehow and be available to answer some of these kind of questions. Okay, good. And I really think you need to be involved with the tribe. Julie Quaid, who I know the city has had relationships with in the past, comes down to the camp almost every Saturday. So a lot of the members are tribal, people. So most of them down there are. So I think that would just be a really smart move.
That event is so community wide that it's probably, it's not the best audience, but if we can get the information out via other partners as soon as possible, I think that, yeah, because that, I mean, there's several thousand people that attend that event, and they're not all in need of, you know, homeless services.
They're in need of a lot of the
A
same.
lot of everything
service.
else. Yep, yep. That's why we're there every year. Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, anybody else? Good question. Hmm. 2 weeks from now is August 7th. Is that a good time? Dr. Becker? You're here. Do you think you're here, Sam, or Johnny? Chief?
I don't think so. I'll be on vacation, then I'll be in Anaheim, and then I'll be in Astoria.
It's funny how you said you're on vacation and then you'll be in Anaheim. Okay. What do you think, Chrissy? Is enough
I'm just wondering if Nick's gonna really have much time
to,
to get things turned around and get, I mean,
Let's
we're gonna have to. get
let's
it-
shoot for the 21st. No, I won't be here on the 14th. Let's shoot for the 21st, and that gives us plenty of time to invite the other agencies.
I think that would be a good suggestion.
Okay. Yes, 2 to 3:30 on the 21st. Right. You're not gonna be in Anaheim still, are you, Chief, on the 21st? Or Astoria? Okay. Okay, all right then. Anybody else? Go.
I being suggested with traffic and outreach, and Karen McCarthy's name came up. So were you gonna contact Karen and ask her to participate in that, or I could do that. I'm volunteering to see if I can get the Hive to have a meeting and discuss having a unified message of crafting, you know, this is coming, and, so were you gonna contact her, or? Karen
Karen
McCarthy,
McCarthy.
the Hive came up with the assisting of crafting a message to homeless campers.
Yeah, once we got the message link put together, I was gonna reach out to her and see if she can pass it on.
So you're not asking for her to craft a message?
No,
Okay,
no. We're doing that because we want this, we want the message to be consistent.
okay. Right. Right, okay.
Okay. Nobody else has anything? We'll go ahead and adjourn at 3:09.